Ron Ash. I'm Ron Ash, your host. We are the Being Television Radio Network, live and local, national, and international on great stations worldwide. For a complete list of our affiliates and showtimes, visit us online at beingwithronash.com. That's beingwithronash.com. And today you are being with Ron Ash and Ayn Cates Sullivan, an award-winning and best-selling author focusing on mythology and folklore for the modern age. Welcome, Ayn Cates Sullivan.
Thank you for having me on the show.
You're very welcome, young lady. We had a little interesting interaction before the show. We started discussing our own beginnings as far as personal awakenings had gone, and we actually got back to the Catholic Church, believe it or not, because I was brought up Catholic, and my awakening began with seeing a lot of numbers, got a little bit into that mysterious book that we read very little of as a child growing up in the Catholic Church, but we had our little scriptures here and there. Went into that by the numbers, and I started picking out metaphysical scripture, which I really didn't even know what metaphysical was. I didn't know what law of attraction was. Eventually that was revealed to me, but I was just astounded by the power that was inside these laws that I just happened to pick up in that particular ancient writing. And today we're going to talk a lot about Celtic goddesses and heroines as well. And you were telling me that you started off with the Mary Magdalene connection.
Well, yes, I'll take it back even when I was young. My grandmother was a Sunday school teacher, so we I guess we both had that biblical connection, and I was always really curious. But what happened to me was that I was starting to struggle with the fact that I really couldn't find the feminine in the church. So I was struggling with that a lot, and so I wound up in England and heard about this place. I don't know if you know it. It's called the Chalice Well in England, in Glastonbury.
No, I'm not familiar with that. No.
Yes. Yeah. Have you been?
No, not at all.
Well, it's an interesting place because supposedly Joseph of Arimathea came with the Grail or the Chalice in 1 A.D. to Glastonbury in Somerset. And, of course, there's all kind of speculation about what that Grail was. Was it a cup? Was it the cup that held the blood of Christ? Was it the Magdalene herself? Was it the child? In some cases, it's the child of Jesus and the Magdalene are heretics,
Okay.
believe that he brought Sarah. So anyway, so when you go to Glastonbury, there's this big melting pot with all sorts of people talking about spiritual things, and they get much wilder from then on. But what I just became fascinated by the Grail and what the Grail was, and this tradition in the British Isles of going to these wells and peering into the wells and asking for the Grail maiden and finding feminine essence and going, a heroine quest. This is subtle. This is almost lost. This is something that I have to listen deeply for. So that started me off.
I remember a program I watched about the Grail at one time, and they were looking at the Last Supper, and then they were saying one of the apostles at the Last Supper was actually Mary. And the chalice was that distance. You remember that?
I do.
Really, yeah. So
absolutely. And I think Dan Brown really went for that one too, right? So who knows? I did start looking at Mary Magdalene, and certainly she was not a whore. It seems like in a lot of the traditions, especially if you go back to some of the old texts, she was meant to be the church. She was actually an enlightened being that was the counterpart of the Christ, and so I don't know for certain what she is, but the quest itself, the quest that it opened up was really interesting, and it did not take me as I thought it would maybe towards France and the caves, the Magdalene caves. I did go but the quest really started taking me west towards the Welsh goddesses, Erenrud and Blwydaiwys, and then to some even more ancient ones. So the Grail quest took me into the Celtic world. So if we go back to the story of, say, the Cailleach, that's a 10,000-year-old story. And what's fun? Have you ever heard of this? The Cailleach, like the old woman of the world. Have you ever heard of this character? When I first started researching them, I think they had almost died out. I mean, until I think it was 1917, after the Easter Rebellion. If people were told these Gaelic stories or in Ireland, you could be killed for it. And so I was given when I was given my overseas research award, they said I didn't even know what I was getting into. They just said go over there and collect folklore, and so I was working with I was studying Lady Gregory, who so in early 1900s had become the patron of W.B. Yeats, who's a very famous poet, very famous mystic poet, W.B. Yeats. And so I found myself in these landscapes along Galway and so forth, Sligo, where I was starting to understand why sitting by one of these lakes or one of these turlaws that you might start opening up to mystical awareness because it's there in those places. So the Grail quest for me really became a collection. You could say a collection of female archetypes. Magdalene being the awakened one, the Cailleach, the old woman of the world, being the wise one, the Anya being the brilliant one, and so forth.
Where do you think we went off course and it became like women were second-class citizens rather than equals? Because even when you look back, let's say back into the Bible again, and you look at Genesis, and it was, we created them in our image, men and women. Where did it all get off course? I'm really confused by that. It doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's a really brilliant question. It's a really brilliant question. And I'll answer it a couple different ways. One, I ran into several years ago, I ran into these three very small Mayan priests who said to me, do you know that the stories of the feminine, the energy of the feminine has not been allowed to be on the planet in 5,125 years. You need to tell the stories of the women before that. And I kind of I almost dismissed them, and my husband grabbed them, and he said, these people dream. They're wise. Listen to them. And so I went back and I talked to them again. And as they spoke, I went, there might be something to that. So 2012, finally this feminine energy gets to return. Because in my first book, Legends of the Grail Stories of Celtic Goddesses, that's the time period I go to find the really empowered feminine. And so, what happens to the feminine? I mean, if in that book too, I give a 33,000-year her story instead of her story. So some of it's intuitive because you can only go back so far without guessing, some certain amount of guesswork. But it looks like there was a matriarchal culture at one point, and I started focusing on Ireland specifically because that's where you can find a lot of these stories. And bless St. Patrick, because his monks wrote a lot of the stories down, and that's why we have them. But, if we go back to the time of the Tuatha De Danann, so that's 1700 BC and before, this is the time the children of Danu, they're called, and they're known as the wise, beautiful ones. And these stories are still told all through Ireland. It's really considered part of the history there. And if you have Irish blood, which I think 9 million people do in the United States, you might have a touch of the Tuatha, the fairy folk in you too. So they were sort of, we would know them as Merlin, or Merlin's counterpart, Nimue, or, so the magical wizards and so forth. So these beings treated women and men completely equally. And they knew, and you might actually like this, they knew that if a man was going to rule as a hero or a king or a leader, it was the woman, it was the goddess of the land that had to grant him that right. She had to say, yes, you have what it takes. And in doing so, and there's something delicious in doing so, because in doing so, there are checks and balances, because the men are also, they're going back to the feminine and saying, does your magic really work? Are you really working in alignment with life? And then the masculine is meant to sort of protect the creation. So in this particular case, you create life, you create balance in nature, balanced wind, balanced fire, balanced water, balanced earth. And when that goes out of balance in that tradition, when you go out of balance, this is the pre-Celtic tradition, you create what? A wasteland. Everything goes nuts. There's fires and earthquakes and floods and nuts, because the male and female energies are out of balance. And, of course, we all have male and female energies inside of each one of us, so it's not necessarily gender, but it's about finding balance. And so I was so touched to go to some of these places, and you have to, there is such thing as like ontological shock, where you're there and you go, wait a second, I was raised Christian, and this is weird, But when you're standing in those places and you're looking at these old cairns, and you crawl in some of them, and they have like 3-leaf clovers inside, and you go inside and you go, these were probably healing temples. These, sort of European indigenous healing temples, and they probably knew some stuff that we've forgotten.
Yeah, some stuff might have been put away. They felt like it was in conflict with the preferred teachings of the leadership of the times, and usually a lot of times there's that fear factor in there, so they kind of, push these things away.
Well, the book, this Legends of the Grail, Stories of Celtic Goddesses, starts actually with your question, which was very intuitive, because it starts with Danu saying, it is now time for my daughters and myself to go underground. The Milesians are coming. And so there were a series of invasions that happened at that point. And so these more gentle cultures that were very in tune with nature and could read the trees and could sing with the stars and all, they really literally decided to go underground. So now they're called the people of the She, and so they're underground. And I think the sort of the more magical ones, also this is also in the second book, The Heroines of Avalon, they also realized that they had to become misty. Because they were being, at this point, there's a persecution that's starting. And, I was raised Christian, but, there were some atrocities done in the name of, all religions have done some atrocities, So, so those things happened. And a lot of the old, goddess temples and places of worship now have churches on top of them, which is great in a way, because it means that they've been protected and the wells and springs are protected. And it means that we can go back there and look again and go, wait a second, where was the feminine cut out? Can I speak to the Grail Maiden presence that's here? Can I awaken this archetype that's within me and around me that so wants to come forward now? Because, hey, it's time. It's awakening time. It's time for the feminine to be fully fledged once again, and for this earth to blossom into the golden age,
It's really beyond that time. I actually made a statement the other day, and earnestly I said that as a man, I can say this, that men have failed us. We have been unable to fix things. We've been unable to, change the vibe that exists in the governments of the world. I really would like to see 2 women on a Democratic ticket running for president, just to kind of bring that all out again, and have that empathy and that compassion and that logic too, as well, to realize, hey, this is what we're dealing with here. This is what's at stake, and that also that love and protection of a mother. I'm not saying that it's not there for a father as well, but as you said, and I could just imagine the interview when, somebody was being indoctrinated into the leadership back in the day and what they looked at. And I'm sure one of the biggest things was empathy, and the other was compassion before that male was allowed to rule. Well,
and it's interesting, because in the Celtic tradition, what the woman would do for the so I'll tell you a story. So there was a man named Cuchulainn of Merhevna. And by the way, I love what you said. I do think it's time for women to really step forward. And it's going to happen. It's just time. But but to take it way back, and I think these stories, the reason they're told generation after generation is because they still have relevance, and that's why people love them. But there was a man once upon a time named Cuchulainn of Merhevna. He's a very famous Irish hero. He's one of the most famous in Ireland. He's kind of like Achilles in the Greco-Roman tradition. So Cuchulainn wanted to become a hero, but he also was completely in love with this woman, Emer. And as we were saying, in the Celtic tradition, the woman has to choose the man. She has to say, yes, you're the one that can be this. But so he goes to her and he talks to her, and the thing is this, he's not really ready yet. So what does he have to do? He has to get on a curragh, he has to get on this boat, and he has to set sail to Scotland to meet the sorceress Skyach, because the sorceress Skyach has the magic, and you can't really be a hero unless you have your magic, So he gets there, and you have to jump across this 22-foot ravine, and there's skulls all at the bottom of it, So he's looking at these skulls, and then he goes ahead and he makes the leap, and he makes it, and there's Skyach, and she's standing there. She doesn't have much on, she's kind of reading him. She's like, am I going to make love with him? Am I going to kill him? Am I going to turn him into a hero? What am I going to do? What's his unfolding? And she goes, he's a hero. So she puts her dagger away and she takes off running in the forest, and he follows her. So she puts him through all these initiations. He has to learn how to handle a lightning bolt without dying. He has to learn how to work with all of the elements. And so together, so really it's this dance of togetherness. I think maybe on the next ticket we need a man and a woman dancing together, because we need different qualities. We actually need the cohesion of the masculine and feminine. And so eventually Cuchulainn comes back and he marries Emer, and he does become one of the greatest of all heroes. And of course where it goes wrong, you see more as you get closer to Arthurian legend. So it's 5th century to 12th century, and you find the stories of, say, Balin, who creates the Fisher King, the Wounded King. And he does it because he doesn't know how to use his sword correctly, which has a lot of... So Lady of the Lake is saying, don't use your sword yet. You're not trained yet. You don't use your sword to dominate. Your sword is to be used for truth. Do you understand what truth is? And, of course, he doesn't. He's just blindly flailing with his sword, and he wounds the king, and the world becomes a wasteland. So again, we see... when things go out of balance, when people use their powers incorrectly, we create what? What we've done right now. We've just created a big mess.
Exactly.
So yes, there's a lot to do.
So what are ancient heroines and goddesses? Why are they important to us right now?
I think we need... So I think one thing is that we read a lot of news, and I was thinking today maybe I want to read less news, but we see tornadoes and crazy politicians, and we just see all this stuff, and then so it can make us feel inadequate, helpless, like there's no hope. And so I think what happens when we go back in time. And I think actually there was something that really literally happened. I think that, I don't know who did it necessarily, but I think we were systematically disconnected from our roots. And when you're disconnected from your roots, you're disempowered. You can't do anything. You've lost your magic. So one thing that happens when you go back, and people love Stonehenge, they love Newgrange, and there are lots of other great stone circles, and even in, here in the United States, Mount Shasta and all kinds of places where you can go back and you really begin to find your roots again. And your roots being not only your sort of cosmic tale and your connection to the planet, but also your ancestors. I mean, you're only here because your ancestors loved you, enough to bring you here. And so when we start to root, and then we can start to connect to these superheroines, and these are ancient archetypes. We think, that's just imagination. But Merlin's what? He's like 10,000. His story's been told for over 10,000 years. He's much older than we are. So it's a big energy that we start to tap into. And so when we start to tap into that hero or heroine energy, then we start to awaken to our innate gifts. And then we become people who can actually start co-creating and start helping with the seas and the air and the trees. And, so we actually, our inner Merlin starts to wake up. And it's like, no, we're not disempowered. We're not helpless. Anything but, we can turn this around in a minute. But we do, in a way. You have to say, yeah, we've got to find our superpowers. But it's not make-believe. We each have this spark. We each have this piece. We just have to remember it.
So, a lot of monks in monasteries throughout the world work on just what you're saying. They use that knowledge of how the universe works through prayer and meditation to change the world for the better. And a lot of it is things that we talk about a lot on the show and in our writings, as far as, seeing it in your mind, feeling it in your heart, and just kind of, working on becoming the creator of your environment, of your experience. And I think it's really great when you're at that point and you have it all figured out and you begin to affect the people around you, and then those people pick up on it and they begin to act a little differently, and they affect the world, the people around them as well. So it really is like a domino effect.
It really is. I think when you go on your quest or your pilgrimage, or however you tap into the greater intelligence, when you get to that moment when you've tasted this, I call it like essential joy. When you start to understand, oh my goodness, this piece that's true about me. The truth is that I'm very happy, that I'm very creative, that I'm, and I think it's essentially true for all human beings. And then you start to wonder about the suffering and the pain, and you go, oh my goodness, that's a cloak that could really just fall off. That part is the illusion. And once you get a little taste of that nectar, it's like these flowers keep opening up, and then you're on an amazing adventure. You just have to, you can't stop at that point. You just got to keep awakening. And I do think people are awakening all over the planet now. It's happening in little places, here. It's like popcorn, people are just waking up. And that's the great hope for the planet.
So in ancient Ireland and in current Ireland as well, amongst the spiritual people, what do they do to really connect with their roots and, use these energies to create? Is there something different than we do here in the States, or that they do in Asia?
Right. There's so much to that question. First of all, a lot of people feel that there was an Irish root race, just as there was one in Africa and probably in Asia, that there was a race of people who, the people of the Merline. So, and that's still being tested. There are a lot of people at Oxford studying DNA to see if this is true. Brian Sykes is somebody that's working on it. So there are a lot of scholars working on that right now. That might or might not be true, but it's very interesting. And so, I think what can happen to a nation such as Ireland is that people can be disempowered by just spending a lot of time at the pub or on their cell phone or something. So that's a way that you do not empower yourself, right?
Yeah,
but
distraction.
One way you do empower yourself is to go into nature. And in Ireland, there's so many different power spots that you can go to. The most recent one that I did, I go twice a year. I go to Oxford twice a year. I study with John and Kathleen Matthews. And Kathleen is she does Celtic shamanism, which is really brilliant. And John does, he's written 200 books on Arthurian legend. So he's England's expert on King Arthur. So they're both really fascinating. And so the last quest I went on was actually following Tolkien's path from Oxford through the west of England into Wales and all through. So when, and I don't know if this is a common thing that people do. People commonly do something like go to Stonehenge, or they go to, different sacred sites. They go to the Tor, they go to Chalice Well, they go to different churches or labyrinths and so forth. There's lots of ways to start to tap in. But one of the ways, and that I've been most fascinated by, and that is what my books are about really, is taking this heroine's quest, where you're starting to very intuitively follow a path that leads to your ancestral roots. My father was in the lineage of the Llewellyns, which is a royal line in Wales. And so I started following the line of the Llewellyns and just going to these different castles and then going through the woods and just allowing the deities that reside there to kind of reveal the next step. So what you're really doing is you're developing your clairvoyance, your clairaudience, your clairsentience. You're starting to receive the mysteries that were really almost completely lost, that are bubbling up out of the springs and wells now. I mean, you can really see it if you go to Stonehenge. I mean, right now, if you go, it's like a museum. There's hundreds of people there every day. And when I first started doing this 35 years ago, I could
go. Every time I see Stonehenge, it's just empty.
Once upon a time, it was empty. You could sit there and have a picnic or whatever, but now you can't get close.
Oh,
okay. You can't get close. It's changed a lot. It has really changed a lot. But there are other places you can go where you can still touch the stones, where you can still feel the vibration. There are some people who say that the consciousness was left from the old people, the Druids or so forth, in these stones, and that you can go and you can it helps with your awakening. But for sure, the scientists are showing that when you're in the sacred sites, that it awakens the torus. So it's awakening your energy field, and it's supporting your consciousness, it's supporting your awakening. So it's fun. It's really fun.
So do you think that's what they say there's various vortexes around the world? Do you think that's like one of the vortexes?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a great book called The Sun and the Serpent, and so there. Actually, in Glastonbury, there's a zodiac that's built into the landscape, and so you can go to each part of the zodiac. Like the Chalice Well is on the dove, so it's the Aquarian age, and you can go to each of these places and feel the landscape and feel how the landscape speaks. So that's really fun, and it's quite well known. There's also one near London called the Kingstonbury Zodiac, and you can. But when you go, it requires this kind of bardic, mythic imagination, because you can go to these places and you walk over and go, oh, it's Stonehenge. Okay, these weird guys drag stones over and whatever. Or you can go to these places, right, and you can start to enter like your mythic imagination, and that's when it gets to be interesting, because you're standing on these places. The Druid, well, these are actually places that were built even before the Druids, but say the Tuatha De Danann knew where these places were, these vortexes, and so they would put stones there, and the stones were supposedly acted as like acupuncture needles, so we would go to have acupuncture, so to enliven us, and so these old stones were to really enliven the land, and so you go there, and if you're kind of on, and then you get to this sacred site, and you enter. You consciously choose to enter. It's like, okay, you're humble, you're respectful, you're curious, you're open. You have to be like a kid. You have to be like a kid. Okay, let's be the fool here, and let's just go and see what happens. Then there might be doors, to the other world. You might experience contact with other beings and so forth. But you have to be able to open up and go, oh, look, it's a bird. Oh, and that bird's singing to me, and it has a message. And, oh, look, there's an oak tree, and there's a door inside of it. And I'm going to go with my mythic imagination into this other world, and maybe I'll meet somebody wonderful, So that's that's in my books. I give lots of practices and examples of how you can do that. How you can step by step open up.
I've documented many instances in my own books of things like that have happened to me, and I kind of moved away from documenting too. I probably should get back into journaling these things, because many people have said that, have read my books, and said, I've never seen anybody document so many miracles that have happened in their lives before, as you have. And at one point, I don't know what it was, but I just kind of like stopped doing that. And it's funny that we're on the radio today and it's coming up because the night before last, during that dream state, I was actually being led around at some sort of a party by an angelic being, and they led me around. It wasn't by the hand; it was like by my forearm, and I just kind of, moved along. And it was just I was speaking to my wife about it the next day, and it was that same thing. As I began to mention what had happened, goosebumps, hair standing up on edge on my arms and everything. You just feel the energy of the whole thing, and it's almost like an affirmation that yes, this was really an angelic experience that took place with this being, and he was just comforting me and letting me know that things are moving forward in a direction that's going to be very good for you.
Oh, that is lovely. I absolutely, completely believe in miracles. We have to be open to them. I love the angelic presences, and I think they're really vouching for us. They really want us. So maybe, who knows how that's going to unfold? That's exciting.
Yeah, I think it was something. It was just it was time for me to be comforted, and we're all needing to be comforted at different times in our lives. And this was like, hey, I gotta go talk to this guy, Ron Ash, and let him know
Don't worry,
things are moving along
okay.
the way they're supposed to move along. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot going on the planet right now. There's a lot, and so people can get very, you can experience everything in this world, world of duality, and so I that's why I feel like it's really important to know stories, and whether they're biblical or whether they're Celtic or whether you go into the Ramayana or the Labra, they're beautiful stories that go back through time, and the reason they're still alive is because they've helped every generation, and that's why they're retold for each generation. Is so when we encounter something that's really difficult, we know how to walk through it, and I think that's really the value of the bard. A true bard was supposed to know 250 stories of their people, and if they knew, 250 stories, and if you knew that, then you could train as a seer. And that's interesting because it's like you already have your kind of your morals in place. You already know your compass, and then you can see from a place of clarity. And then after 20 years of that, you might be able to become a druid, which is very beautiful. They were really, the druids were the spiritual people of that area. And one of the things you can do now, you asked what you can do now, is you can join the bards, ovates, and druids. And they're bringing. This is a sort of Oxbridge group that has started bringing this sort of new neo-druid tradition alive. And people go, oh, didn't they do human sacrifice? Not really, no, but that's what Caesar had to say about them in order to kill them all. They had to be demonized. Yeah. But they were actually very beautiful, and they were much more like Brahmin priests. They were the ones that were they knew the lore of the trees. They really understood the land. They understood the elements. So they were very beautiful beings. And if you think of their training, this 20 years of training that you would need to go through, they actually they had something.
Okay, I'm here with Ayn Cates Sullivan, author of Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, and Legends of the Grail, Stories of Celtic Goddesses. By all means, get online, take a look at these books, and if you have the opportunity, by all means, order them up, read their summaries, do what you have to do. But it sounds like interesting stuff, Anne. You also talk about the Celtic 8-wheel calendar, and how important is that in today's world?
Well, the reason to go buy the books is because there's a lot of information there. If you're interested in, let's face it, we live in a wasteland right now, and if what we want to do is we want to move back into harmony and balance with the earth. And what we can look to the future, to technology. I actually do agree with that, but we also need to look to the past, to how we work in a harmonious way, how we can there's some obvious things that we're all talking about, but the 8-wheel calendar is lovely, and we all work with it in a way, because we all know the solstices and we all know the equinoxes. We might not know why they're in place the way they are, but we know that we know, and so in the old Celtic tradition, in the summer, everything that was masculine, that was out in the world, that was positive and brilliant, the sun was celebrated. And at the winter solstice, it was dark, and you went inside the caves, and it was a time to notice the seeds and how the world is dreaming. And so that's the time that the feminine was celebrated. And at the equinoxes, there was the dance between the masculine and the feminine, the fertility dances. And then at harvest time, it was the time to celebrate what had come through in the summer, with the life that had come, and also what was passing away. So, and then there's cross-quarter days too that were celebrated, and all of those are in my book. You can read them, you can sort of play with them, see what works for you. But one thing that just does work is if you just take your shoes off and go and put your feet in the grass, just take some deep breaths. Just feel the earth. It's okay to feel your body. It's okay to feel your earth. It's okay to be feminine. It's okay to be masculine. But just wherever you are in this place and time is perfect. It's completely perfect. You are perfect in this moment. But to get that sparkle, to know, gosh, I could be anywhere, but no, I'm right here. I'm right here in this moment, and there's a reason for me to be here. And let's just fully show up right now.
Are there exercises, meditations, or practices in your book that help us connect to specific deities?
Yes, there are. Each section has it. The myth it was originally given. So those are very well researched. Then I went to each sacred site where these deities reside, and I tell their story in first person. So it was a way of knowing the deity and feeling the land and being receptive to the story that wanted to be told. And then after that, yes, there's a way to connect to a tree, to a blessing, to do a visualization, to connect to the deity, and then there are some other gifts in each section as well, so that you can really learn your true nature. So there are lots of exercises and so forth to be able to connect in. And it's, I did it through King's College London. I'm like a hybrid, so I'm really well trained in the academic world. So, and I really tried to keep that integrity. But then I went into the world that's emerging, the feminine world of intuition and dreams and all these things that were repressed that we need. Without our dreams, without the earth, we go into despair. If you're unhappy or you're feeling despair, listen to your dreams. That's what the Mayans do. They dream at night and they go, oh yes, and then they share their dreams with each other. Dreams are important, and this world is very animated, and the body is a great thing. So I think that's part of what when we do something like the 8-wheel calendar, we're allowing ourselves to move back in rhythm and harmony with the earth, with the sky, with the air, with the water, and then just in doing that, you tend to become more conscious, and you just maybe you won't get that plastic bottle of water, or you just will think about what you're purchasing and what you're throwing away, and you just might think, you just start to become a little more conscious about, how every footstep that you take on this earth, every footstep has an impact, every thought has an impact, and so if we can shift towards like stepping beautifully, being kind to each other, thinking about the words that we're putting into the world, the words are like our words are like magic, they're spells,
words are very powerful.
Yeah.
And our actions are very powerful as well. It's so easy to have a positive attitude throughout your walk and really lift people's spirits, and it's contagious. It is.
It is contagious, and it's so important. And I think it's really important. When we're talking about religion and spirituality too. That was one thing I really struggled with, working with 33,000 years of material, because you can see the beautiful things that we've done and then the really ugly things we've done to each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to be respectful of, wherever anybody is in their awakening process. And if people need a certain religious structure, fantastic. If they don't want a religious structure, fantastic. But just, that awakening spiral, this kindness, this love, this compassion, this is what's important. And if we can, reach out and hold each other's hands, then we'll thrive. We'll get through all this.
So you said a little while ago that the world is animated. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that, and it's funny, I've said this to a variety of people who were sort of, our society tends to think of everything as dead. We've been in this materialistic scientific culture for a while, which I think we're coming out of. And in the old Celtic tradition...
we're definitely coming out of it. The millennials are kind of casted that aside. I noticed that they're more geared towards experiences rather than, things. The thing is kind of going away. And I've seen the transition in the, I would say the late 70s, early 80s, where we became more concerned with what we had as far as our identification rather than who we were and what we did.
Mhm. Yeah, so things are, and I think, we needed a period of time, and I think this is where the Christos, the Christ consciousness is really important. We needed a period of time where we really started to understand who we were as individuals, and got really clear about that. What's the ego? What's the essential self? So a lot of us have been doing that work for a long time. So now we are more identified with our true nature, which we have to experience. Someone can tell you it doesn't matter. It might awaken something in you, but unless you experience it inside yourself, it really, whatever. It's just words. So, so as you step into your true nature and you realize, now you're starting to work more and more with your in-world, and you're living, you're paying more attention to your dream states, and you're paying more attention to your allies that and this sort of thing is happening. Then when you move out into the outer world and you encounter a tree, you're going to probably realize that, that tree actually has consciousness, and that's alive too. And that animal also, and gosh, that lake is actually alive, and there's a lot that's living in that lake, and my goodness, even this butterfly is really beautiful. So you start to, and then, The Hidden Life of Trees right now is such an incredibly popular book, and I think for good reason, But anyway, so when you start to enter an animated world, then you're starting to work really a little bit more with the shamanic worldview, where you're starting to consciously dream with the earth. Now there's a practice that I think it's in my book. It's in the first book, I believe, where you with the Kaliach, where you actually crawl on your belly into a cairn. And it's easier to do in Britain or Ireland because they have these places, but we can do it here in caves also. And you crawl in, and usually about October, you crawl in and you put your back up against a stone, and you ask to dream with the earth. What is the earth dreaming, and how do I dream with the earth? And then, if you've been doing your meditation practices, if you really know how to go quiet, if you're really in that process of awakening, you might really see some things and hear some things and maybe feel some really loving presence, or you might smell roses, or, something might happen where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm actually feeling the way that Gaia dreams. In the Celtic tradition, it would be I feel the way the Kaliach dreams. So, and then when you come out, then you realize I'm in a dream with the earth. We're really dreaming together. And the earth, left to her own devices, is very balanced. And if I can dream with her, I actually find my own balance. So don't ever let anybody cut you off from your roots, your ancestry, don't let anyone cut you away from nature or tell you your body's bad or anything like this, because that's the way to disempower. And the way to empower is to feel the body, feel what the body is saying. What is my body saying now? And like you said, I know with my own kids, they're very clear about that. My body says this, Mom. This is what I'm doing. So, yeah, it's all fun. It's incredible fun. Yeah.
When we stop living on our making. For us, it's writing, and I've gone through it myself too, where I kind of didn't see it being as productive as I would have liked to see it, and maybe a mild rebellion against writing and just stopped doing it altogether for a while. But then I realized that, wait a second here, this is my gift, this is my passion, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And when I got away from doing it, I got very depressed. And all it took to really come out of that was to start doing it again.
Exactly. If you're put on this planet to be a writer and you don't do it, you'll start to shrivel up because you're not completing your life purpose and mission. And I had a period of time, too, when I didn't write. And I also had the same sort of thing. It was like, why am I here? But I started going on these quests, and then I couldn't help it. I just started writing again, and I was like, oh, I get it. I was dying because I wasn't following my passion. I wasn't following my thread, and who cares if it's weird? It's what I'm here to do. I'm a mystic.
Yeah. Because it'll seem unrealistic to a lot of people. And the odd thing about my experience was it took place so far after I recognized, let me put it this way, I had a center, creative cultural center we call it. It was a spiritual center, and we had groups of people that would come a couple of times a week to do different groups with me and an associate, and we had other facilitators there as well involved in different types of things. But I think it was my Thursday night law of attraction group, metaphysics group, there was a woman who was very unhappy, and she couldn't figure out why, and she was trying to put all the different exercises that we were talking about into effect and stuff. And sometimes you just have that epiphany, and I had an epiphany. I said to her, well, what was the last time you were happy, and what were you doing when you were happy? Oh, it was back such and such, and I used to paint and this and that. I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you go back to painting? The week after, the next time we met, which was probably about 2 weeks after, he says, oh my God, I started painting. I'm so happy now. I have so much joy. And so that's exactly what she did. She kind of stopped doing that for whatever reason. Maybe somebody told her it was a waste of time. Maybe she began to feel it was a waste of time. Going back to what we were talking about material gains through different things. But the goal here is really happiness. It doesn't have to come through money. It could come through living your passion. And that's what happened. She did the same thing that I did a decade later after teaching her.
Well, it's true. I remember when I was telling my parents I'm on Earth to be a mystic poet, and they were like, how are you going to make money doing that? And I said, I don't know, but I will. I'll figure it out, And the thing is, it's fun. As long as I've written, the red carpet has rolled out in front of me. And the times that I've gone, I'm not making enough money, this is crazy, I'm going to try to do something else, I land flat on my face, and then I'm like, well, never mind, I'm picking the pen up again, because this is where the bliss is. And it's not that everybody's a writer either, like you said, people are painters, but I think what's really important is for each person to find their creative expression. Maybe it's dancing, maybe it's singing, maybe it's wood making, maybe it's, who knows, maybe it's being a podcast, have a radio show, whatever. As long as you're tapped in, I always say be 60% in your in world and 40% out. Because if you have a big in world, there's a lot that you can produce, and it's really fun. And hey, it's quirky, but Dr. Seuss wasn't exactly ordinary. There's some there's some real genius that can come from these places. Tolkien was a little out there too, and we still have Lord of the Rings. So, dare to dream. It's very, very important. And when we try to get it all right, when we try to be perfect, that's when we dry up.
Yeah, that's the problem. and I used to do a workshop called the Out of You Workshop. And one of the first things I used to tell people is don't get caught up in all the spelling and the grammar. When you have the thought or you're ready to tell the story, tell it. You could always go back into it later. And I kind of ironed out, different steps of writing a book. And people would just come out with such beautiful stuff. And sometimes would need a lot of tweaking, but sometimes it would need very little tweaking, but their thought was there and their story was valuable.
Yes. everyone's story is valuable. It's very important. And everyone, every day people tell stories. They'll tell stories about things that happened to them. They'll, in the past, or what happened today, or what's going to happen in the future. We're storytellers. That's what we are. But we're also authors of them, so we can change them.
Mm-hmm.
We can edit them. One of the most brilliant things that I learned with writing for the writers who are listening is that after I went to Columbia University to the master's program, and I was with these fantastic writers, Joseph Brodsky, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, Susan Sontag, and all these people, and was presenting my work, and there was a lot of feedback and a lot of competition. It's Ivy League. By the time I came out, I could hardly eke out 4 sentences. It was so critical. And then I started working as an editor in literary magazines. I became more critical, and then I'm at PhD in London, which is not easy to do. So the writing kind of stopped. And somebody said to me one day, why don't you edit with a red pen and write with color pens, and make it a completely different exercise? So you create, you write, and a week later go back and look at it. And I started doing it, and it's been one of the most helpful things, because I do think you need to be a good editor to make a really, really great piece of literature. But you cannot create and edit at the same time. It's like trying to run a race and tie your shoelaces at the same time. You can't do it. Tie your shoelaces first, run your race, and then check your shoelaces again,
Yeah.
So
your technical is in conflict with your creative in that situation.
Right. And I think some things like that too.
It's funny you said the thing about college and writing, and after you were done, you couldn't complete 2 sentences on your own, because the same thing happened to me. And with drawing, I used to love to draw. I could stay up all night drawing. I wouldn't even know what time it was. It'd be 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, oh my God, I've been up all night drawing. But when I went to school for it, I really stopped drawing. I couldn't do it anymore. It didn't become enjoyable.
I know. My daughter went to art college too, and she says, "Come and pick me up." There's no spirituality here. There's nothing for me to tap into. There's no life.
Yeah.
And but it's also our job, I believe, to go out, take our shoes off, be okay to be. It's okay. I mean, they say you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're a child, right? So something like this. So it's very true. In order to enter the dream world, we can't be frightened of it. It's like, oh, what, are you crazy? Who cares? Because what you're doing is you're entering this world that's feeding you. You're getting nourishment from your dreams. And then if you consciously dream, you're getting nourishment from that. And if you're using that dream world for your writing, for your spiritual awakening, for your drawing, then you're going to be well fed, and you're going to be powerful, actually, also, because you're juicy, and the money always comes. It always comes if you do what you love, somehow, sometimes at the last minute, but it shows up. Yeah. But I think really our first focus, if we focus on money first, that's when that's where we go wrong. We go off track. It can't be the predominant focus. It needs to be there, but not number one. Number one is really our connection to the divine, and the way that we create with the divine, because everything is created from that place.
So speaking of art, you have some powerful illustrations in your books as well.
Yes, I do. And I wish they were mine, but I can't say that. I have a wonderful story, actually. The illustrations are done by a woman named Belle Crow DeCray, and I have written a lot of children's books, and she's the illustrator for the children's books. I've got a new one getting ready to come out about a dragon. But anyway, so what happened is one day she was an interior designer, and I come into my daughter's bedroom. She's working on my daughter's room, and she's sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I said, Belle, did somebody die? What's going on? And she goes, I pulled your children's books out, and they're so beautiful. I want to illustrate them. So that's how it began. And she illustrated Sparkle and the Gift, which won a bunch of literary awards, did well. Then she did A Story of Becoming, which won 18 literary awards, and it had 250,000 downloads. and so that really set my career off, and hers. She's an amazing illustrator. So we've done 7 books together, to 8 soon. And she's really a phenomena to work with, because we had these my kids had drawn like little stick figures to go with the characters and so forth, but she fleshed them out and brought them to life in a way that I think was really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I have 2 children's books as well. One's Maple Tree, and the other one is Fishing with Tiano. And both of them are in great need of an illustrator as well. Fishing, yeah, same.
Oh, contact Belle. You never know. Check out A Story of Becoming. It's actually, because you said Maple Tree, A Story of Becoming is actually the journey of an apple tree, told from this perspective of the apple tree, and it's about miracles. Actually, that book. I think that's why it's done so well. It's really full of hope. All these things happen to the tree, and every time she comes back stronger and more miraculous than before. So. It's been a great adventure with her too, and also to see how Belle has grown over the years too. Because when we first started, the first one she did was Sparkle and the Gift, which is really adorable, and it's a fairy tale, and the illustrations are very colorful, and but the one we just finished, which is called Eva and the Rainbow Dragon, it's very detailed, and you can really see the fairies, and there's quite a fantastic scene with Eva down with the dragon breathing fire, and so her skill set has really grown in this process. Also, it's fun to collaborate. Yeah, if you can find someone who can dream with you,
Yeah. So Maple Tree is a story that's it has a moral to it about appreciating the things that you have now, because once they're gone, then you'll say, wow, now I really understand how important that maple tree was to me. And Fishing with Tiano is about a journey in spirituality and preparation to become the chief of the tribe. So that's an interesting story too. So that would be really great to have fantastic illustrations.
Both of those books sound really amazing. I think there's something to children's stories that they're very, very important, and our children. It's one of the first things our children encounter, and they read, and they remember the stories. I mean, my kids could recite the stories that I've written back to me. They know all the details, and then some of their other very favorite books, like The Giving Tree. That's another one. With the Velveteen Rabbit, right? But what I didn't know when I first started working on children's books, was the industry standard. Like, I didn't know that they all had to be 32 pages and under 1,000 words, and so they're really like writing a poem. When we started working with the text for Rainbow Dragon, I had 4,000 words, and I'm like, oh gosh, it might have been 5,000. I have to
some whittling to do.
Right, so I'm like, okay, I've got to get my editor out now. Where's the red pen? So I loved the story, and Belle loved the story, and she did the illustrations, and then we did the editing, which was actually very challenging. But I think it came out as we'll see. We'll see how people respond to it. But I think it came out as a powerful book. But it's like taking a short story and making a haiku. But I think the message can be made more powerful. When you do this exercise. I mean, even if you're a novelist, to go and back and do a children's book is a brilliant exercise. And then read it to the children, because the children will tell you straight away, that was the best story ever.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to read your book sometime.
All right.
Yeah.
So, do you want to share anything with the listeners before we close out the show? Do you offer any private sessions, consultations, or workshops?
I do. If you go, so my website is AynCatesSullivan.com, and my first name is AYN. And if you look up AYN, you'll probably find me. I'm all over the place. So AYNCATES Sullivan, Ayn Cates Sullivan. And so if you go onto my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I'm just getting ready for my quest for 2020. So I take some, very selective group on quests, people who are awakening and are ready for this sort of experience. I do a little bit of coaching, and I work with authors who write spiritual books. I also own a publishing company, so I've had a lot of fun with my emerging authors. There are 4 that are getting ready to come out, and they're doing great work. It's fun to work as a team. I'm very selective, though. People contact me. I usually say no, but I do love the collaborative effort.
I love collaboration. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's really good. Sometimes I can steer people in the right direction, even if I'm not the right fit, or maybe I'm the right fit. You never know. But so I do that, and I do help. So coach writers that are coming along. I'm not quite so selective about that. So. But the most important thing, I think, if you're listening today, is create. Just be the wondrous child. Ask questions. Dream with the earth. Know that we can turn this whole thing around. We just have to be able to create, to dance together, to hold hands, and just have a beautiful day.
All right, sounds great. Thanks for joining us today. Ayn Cates Sullivan, author of Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, and Legends of the Grail, Stories of Celtic Goddesses. As always, you can learn about Ayn Cates Sullivan and all of our guests, past, present, and future, at beingwithronash.com. That's beingwithronash.com, and we'll see you all on the radio real soon. Be peace, everyone, because peace becomes you.
BTRN's Natural Awakenings Radio explores the various modalities associated with natural health, healing, self-help, and spirituality. Our guests and hosts are the tops in their fields and serve a higher purpose in all they do. Call in live for free psychic readings and intuitive counseling. Connect with source energy and expand your consciousness. Learn about partnership opportunities at mybtrn.com or by phoning 347-537-GIFT. We are the Being Television Radio Network.